"There's another part still," said Mulvaney. "Othrys was in that." "Then I'll believe it all," I answered, not from any special belief in Othrys's word, but from desire to learn the rest. Othrys stole a pup for me when our acquaintance was new, and with the little beast stifling under his overcoat, denied not only the theft, but that he was ever interested in dogs. "That was the beginning of the Afghan business," said Mulvaney. "Years after men that had seen me do the thrick was dead or gone home. I came not to speak of it at the last because I do not care to knock the face of every man that calls me a liar. At the very beginning of the marchin', I went sick like a fool. I had a boot gall, but I was all for keeping up with the regiment and such like foolishness. So I finished up with a hole in my heel that you could have driven a tent peg into. Faith, how often I have preached that to recruits since, for a warning to them to look after their feet. Our doctor, who knew our business as well as his own, he says to me in the middle of the Tangi Pass it was, 'That's sheer damn carelessness,' says he. 'How often have I told you that a marching man is no stronger than his feet? His feet! His feet!' he says. 'Now to hospital you go,' he says, 'for 3 weeks, an expense to your queen and a nuisance to your country. Next time,' says he, 'perhaps you'll put some of the whiskey you poured down your throat and some of those tallow you put into your hair into your socks,' says he." Faith, he was a just man. So soon as we come to the head of the Tangi, I went to hospital, hopping on one foot, woiled with disappointment. 'Twas a field hospital, all flies and native apothecaries and liniment, dropped in a way of speaking close by the head of the Tangi. The hospital guard was raving mad with us sick for keeping him there, and we was raving mad at being kept, and through the Tangi day and night and day, and foot and horse and guns and commissant and tents and followers of the brigades was pouring like a coffee mill. The doolies came dancing through, scores and scores of them, and they turned up the hill to hospital with their sick, and I laid in bed nursing my heel, and hearing the men being tuck out. I remember one night, the time I was tuck with fever, a man came rolling through the tents, and, "Is there any room to die here?" he says. "There's none with the columns." And at that he dropped dead across a cot, and then the man in it began to complain against dying all alone in the dust under a dead man. Then I must have turned mad with fever, and for a week I was praying to the saints to stop the noise of the columns moving through the Tangi. Gun wheels it was that wore my head thin. You know how 'tis with fever." We nodded. There was no need to explain. Gun wheels and feet and people shouting, but mostly gun wheels. 'Twas neither night nor day to me for a week. In the morning they rode up the tent flies, and we sick could look at the pass and consider what was coming next. Horse, foot, or guns. They'd be sure to drop 1 or 2 sick with us we'd get news. One morning, when the fever held off of me, I was watching the Tangi, and 'twas just like the picture of the backside of an Afghan medal. Men and elephants and guns coming one after time, crawling out of the drain. "There were a drain," said Othrys with feeling. I've fell out of being sick in the Tangi twice, and what turns my innards ain't no bloomin' violets neither. The pass gave a twist at the end, so everything shot out sudden, and they built up the troop bridge, mud and dead mules, over a nullah at the head of it all. I lay and counted the elephants, gun elephants, trying the bridge with their trunks and rolling out sagacious. The 5th elephant's head came round the corner, and he threw up his trunk and fetched a toot, and there he shook at the head of the Tangi like a cork in a bottle. Faith, thinks I to myself, he will not thrust the bridge. There will be trouble. Trouble, my God, said Othrys. Terence, I was behind that bloomin' Uti, up to my stock in dust. Trouble. Tell on, then, little man. I only saw the hospital end of it. Mulvaney knocked at the ashes out of his pipe as Ultras heaved the dogs aside and went on. We was to escort them guns, 3 companies of us, he said. Ducey was our major, and our orders was to roll up anything we come across in the tangi and shove it out to the other end. Sort of pop-gun picnic, see? We rolled up a lot of lazy beggars and native followers and some commissary supplies that was bivouacked forever, seemingly, and all the sweeping of arfs, a dozen things of what ought to have been at the front weeks ago. And Ducey, he says to us, "Your most ear-breaking sweeps," he says. "For even's sake," says he, "do a little sweeping now." So we swept me. Oh, how do we sweep 'em along? There was a full regiment behind us, most anxious to get on they was, and they kept on sending us with the colonel's compliments. And what the 'ell was we stopping the way for, please? Oh, they was particular polite. So was Ducey. He sent back what for, and give us what for, and we give them guns what for, and they give the commissart what for, and the commissart give first-class extra what for to the native followers, and on we go again till we was stuck, and the old pass be swimming, alleluia, for 1.5 miles. We ain't no tempers. We hadn't no tempers, nor no seats to our trousies, or our coats, and our rifles was chucked in the carts, so that we might have been cut up at any minute, and we was doing drover work. That what it was, drovin' on the lphnt road. I was close up to the end of the column when we saw the end of the tangi opening out ahead of us, and I says, "The door's open, boys. Ooh, get to the gallery first," I says. Then I saw Ducey screaming his bloomin' eyeglass, his eye looking straight on. "Propped, thar beggar," he says. At the behind end of that bloomin' old utty was shining through the dust like a bloomin' old moon made o' tarpaulin. Then we halted, all chock-a-block, one on top of the other, and right at the back of the guns there sails in a lot of silly grinning camels, what the commissariat was in charge of, sailing away as if they was at the zoological gardens, and squeezing our men most awful. The dust was that up that you couldn't see your hand, and the more we it on 'em, the more the more we sit on them on the ed, the more the driver says, "Acha, by God, by God, if it were at your," before you knew where you were it was. That utty behind end stuck in the pass good and tight, and no one knew what for. First thing we had to do was fight they bloomin' camels. I wasn't going to be eat by no bull oot. No, so I held up my trousies with one hand and standing on a rock and it away with my belt at every nose I saw bobbing above me. Then the camels fell back, and they had to fight to keep the rear guard of native followers from crushing into them, and the rear guard to send down the tangi to warn the other regiment that we was blocked. I heard the Mauts shouting in front that the utty wouldn't cross the bridge, and I saw Ducey skipping about through the dust like a mosquito worm in a tank. Then our companies got tired of waiting and began to mark time, and some goat struck up, "Tomsey, make room for your uncle." After that, we couldn't neither see nor breathe nor ear, and there we was, singing bloomin' serenades to the end of an elephant that don't care for tunes. I sung too. I couldn't do nothing else. They was strengthening the bridge in front, all for the sake of the uti. But by and by, an officer caught me by the throat and choked the sing out of me. So I caught the next man I could see by the throat and choked the sing out of him. "What's the difference between being choked by an officer and being hit?" I asked, remembering a little affair in which Ultras's honor had been injured by his lieutenant. "One's a bloomin' lark, and one's a bloomin' insult," said Ultras. "Besides, we was on service, and no one cares what an officer does then, so long as we gets our rations and don't get us unusual cut up. After that we got quiet, and I heard Ducey say that he'd court-martial the lot of us soon as we was out of the tangi. Then we gave 3 cheers for Ducey, and 3 more for the tangi, and the utties behind end was sticking in the pass, and we cheered that. Then they said the bridge had been strengthened, and we gave 3 cheers for the bridge, but the utty wouldn't move a bloomin' inch. Not him. Then we cheered him again, and Kite Dawson, that was the corner man at all the sing-songs, he died on the way down, began to give a lecture on the behind ends of elephants, and Ducey, he tried to keep his face for a minute, but Lord, you couldn't do such when Kite was playing the fool and asking whether he mightn't have leave to rent a villa to raise his orphan children in the Tangi, 'cause he couldn't get home no more. Then up come an officer, mounted, like a fool too, from the regiment at the back, with some more of his colonel pretty little compliments. And what was this delay, please? We sung him, there's another bloomin' row downstairs, till his 'orse bolted, and then we give him 3 cheers, and Kite Dawson says he was going to write the Times about the awful state of the streets in Afghanistan. The Utties behind end was sticking in the pass all the time. At last one of the mahouts came to Ducey and says something. "Oh, Lord," says Ducey, "I don't know the beggar's visiting list. I'll give him another 10 minutes, and then I'll shoot him." Things were getting pretty dusty in the Tangi, so we all listened. "He wants to see a friend," said Ducey out loud to the men, and he mopped his forehead and sat down on a gun-tail. I'll leave you to judge how the regiment shouted. "That's all right," we says. 3 cheers for Mr. Winterbottom's friend," says we. "Why don't you say so at first? Pass the word for old Squirtstail's wife," and such like. Some of the old men, they didn't laugh. They took it as the same as if we might have been an introduction like, 'cause they knew about Utties. Then we all run forward over the guns and in and out among the elephant legs. Lord, I wondered if the Atha company wasn't squashed. And the next thing I saw was Terence looking like a sheet of wet paper coming down the hillside with the sergeant. "Stroth," I says, "I might have known he'd be at the bottom of any cat's trick." "Now," says I, "now you tell what happened on your end."